Please welcome Faye Penn to the stage.
Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you for coming to our panel. The name of the panel is Negotiating to Lead, and I'm going to start by introducing the panelists. First, I'd like to introduce Nina Vaca, who's the CEO of Pinnacle Group. Lauren McGoodwin is here from Career Contessa. Marty McDonald, who's the founder of Boss Women Media, is here. Rachel Sklar, who's the founder of TheLi.st. And Shay Bolton, who's the managing director of Savills. I want to start out with some introductions, but I know you can each speak to your work better than I can. So starting with Shay, I'd love for you to each introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about what you do.
Hi, my name is Shay Bolton. I'm the managing director at Savills. I actually hail from Los Angeles, but I do a lot of business out here in New York. Working in commercial real estate, I work with predominantly women-led companies. We really try to drive profitability, productivity solutions with respect to your occupancy. So negotiating on behalf of all different companies globally.
Hi, I'm Rachel Sklar. I'm the founder of TheLi.st, which is a high-impact network of professional women, kind of like a brain trust, our equivalent of the, I hate to use this phrase, but it's apt, the Old Boys Network, except neither old nor boys. It's very fresh. There's actually, I calculated it, 39.2% of the panelists at the Riveter Summit are from TheLi.st, so spot them. And I'm also a single mom. I feel like that's germane.
Hey girl, hey, and hey boy, hey for the fellas out there. I'm Marty McDonald. I'm the CEO and founder of Boss Women Media. Boss Women Media is an offline, online women's empowerment community and media company. We create experiences for women to connect through the lens of brands. So specifically, brands who are looking for African American women and women of color to be their target audience. We create experiences to bring a community together and serve up that brand to the forefront of our community.
Hi everyone, my name is Lauren McGoodwin. I'm the founder of Career Contessa. We are a career site for women. I like to say we're a one-stop shop resource. We have everything from job postings, career advice, a career coaching service, online courses, a salary database, you name it, we have it to help you with your career.
Hi there, my name is Nina Vaca. I am the chairman, founder, and CEO of a company named Pinnacle Group. We're an IT services company, so I'm in the IT labor market. I've been in this business for 23 years. I'll never say the word old, just tenured. I am an entrepreneur. I grew up in Los Angeles, California, but got to Texas as fast as I could and started my career right here in New York City. So super delighted to be here with you guys today to share my personal experiences in negotiation. So thank you for having me.
And I'm Faye Penn, and I'm the executive director of women.nyc, which is a New York City government initiative designed to help women advance in their careers and their businesses. And we have a host of programs to do so on our website. We are educating 10,000 women in New York City in salary negotiation. I think we're 2,000 so far into our online goal. So you can find out about that on women.nyc. And we just published a guide to tech training, free and low-cost tech training in New York City, a 30-page guide also on women.nyc. It's great to see so many women in tech-adjacent fields. So let's start with the negotiation story. Who wants to warm us up with a story about negotiating and what happened?
I mean, I successfully negotiated to bring this on stage. I hope it doesn't go off. I just kind of took it, and then everyone backstage was like, "You're allowed to bring that? Bring your phone?" So I think there's a really good lesson in that, which is just do the thing you want to do. Ask forgiveness, not permission.
I had no idea. I didn't know I negotiated. Shay, how about you? You do this all day long, every day.
I do. That's why it's hard to narrow them down. But, I mean, constantly I'm dealing with brokers and attorneys every day. So everything is situational on a successful negotiation platform, if you will. But I can speak to one example. I represent a fintech company out of LA, and they were growing like crazy. They were moving different locations probably every year and a half. And as you can imagine, as a company, your top 2 expenses are your people and your real estate. So it was a big hit to their bottom line year over year. And we were able to take them out of a 15,000 square foot space with 7 years left of term, which is a lot, right? We would sublease that out, and they're like, you know, we actually need to triple in size. We need 30,000 square feet, and we need that in the next 60 to 90 days. And it's one of those things you like smile and like, yeah, no, we can do that. But that is incredibly challenging for a company that size. Like anyone out there who's growing, who's starting, whatever it might be, you need like a year to 18 months to 24 months for a very successful negotiation process. I'd always give yourself that time. But we were able to mechanize a deal to find a company to take over their space, take over their 6-year lease, and move them into an off-market building, which was actually MTV's old headquarters in Santa Monica, all within 90 days. There was a lot of yelling, and this all happened over Christmas. But yeah, there was a lot of yelling, and I like to emphasize
Is
that.
that the secret ingredient? Is that how you pulled this off, yelling? It's like
I'm very
Succession. Who watches
small
Succession?
but mighty, and I feel like if I yell, people are like, yeah, I wouldn't mess with her, kind of thing.
Okay. Lauren, Career Contessa has such a wealth of resources for career growth and development. Where and how does negotiation fit into your suite of offerings, and why is it essential for success?
Oh man, well, negotiations in like everything we do, whether you're negotiating for a job offer, you want to be on a project, you are trying to tell someone, no, I don't want to be on that project. Negotiation really fits into everything we do, whether it's our podcasts and our advice. And we also, because of this, when I first started Career Contessa, I'll be very honest, salary transparency was not a thing. And so we launched something called the Salary Project. And it was just a Google Doc where people would anonymously submit how much money they make and, you know, a couple more facts like their industry, job function. And that grew into becoming such an important tool that we turned it into its own database. So we actually, in terms of suite of offerings, like we made it an entire offering where people can anonymously submit their salary and more information. And we constantly try to talk about what is salary transparency and how it can help everybody in the room. And really, it's not just with your salary, but it happens with other negotiation too. So I would say it's in everything we do, including its own product, the Salary Project.
No, I think you got that right. Both Rachel and you both have mentioned it. I think negotiation is something we do every day, all day. If you think you're not doing it, think again. Negotiating is when you're wanting something from someone and you're willing to give something in return. And if you think about our daily lives, we're doing that all the time. I should have prefaced what Pinnacle does. I've been in the IT field for the last 2 decades, and I've learned a lot. We are, by the way, I should note that Pinnacle in 2018 is the largest and fastest growing women-owned business in America. Wow. So thank you for that. Woo. So in those years, I'm often negotiating deals with customers. I was thinking back, you asked for a story, I was thinking, when was the last time I negotiated something for me personally? And I can't remember because it's always on behalf of the company. But being a woman in a minority-owned company, sometimes you're underestimated in those negotiations. And so I have a lot of experience, almost too many examples of negotiating on behalf of the company. And I'd like to talk about 4 principles that we'll probably deep dive into today on the panel that I think about that are good in any negotiation, whether you're negotiating a deal, whether you're negotiating your salary, whether you're negotiating anything in life. There's 4 principles that I abide by. And number 1 is know your alternative. You've got to know your alternative. And your alternative can change, by the way, through your action. I talk about being crazy good at what you do. The better you are at what you do, the better alternative you're going to have. But you got to know what your alternative is going in. Number 2, know your opponent's hand. And oftentimes we worry about what our hand is. Oh, I've got a bad hand, but I've got this, or I've got a good hand. And you're not thinking about the other person's hand. That is so critical for you to step back and think about. The third thing is take time. Take your time. Anything that's in a rush, I can tell you, is not going to turn out to be a win-win. Time is your friend. Take the time and ask questions. A lot of people, when they're negotiating, forget the way that you find number 2, what your opponent's hand is is you ask a lot of questions. And the fourth, and this is the most important in all my negotiation experience, is give people an off-ramp. Or said another way, allow them to save face. Because when you walk away from a deal or a negotiation, you want the other person to be able to feel like they won, or at least they didn't lose. And so I think when I think back at all the years and everything that I've negotiated, I think of those 4 principles, and then we can elaborate on those. But those 4 principles alone, you can apply to almost any situation.
Great.
I would even add to that is that raw data and data that you can use often leads to negotiating skills that you can apply in your life. So many of you guys may be working in a workplace environment and you're negotiating your salary. You always bring data to the table because data is the decision maker of how you're able to negotiate. We're a 2.5-year-old company and we've raised $250,000 in brand partnerships simply because the data is there that says there are consumers that are not being noticed by companies who are not putting money towards African American women to react from. And because that data leads the decision, it's either they're gonna make the investment in who the consumer is and who their potential target audience is, or they're not. And if they don't, that's okay. Sometimes you think about negotiating and you think about how it's just a one-way street. It is a two-way street for 2 people involved. And if the deal isn't something that you feel like is good and can maneuver you or the other party, then it's a deal that's wasted.
I just wanted to jump in and follow up on yelling from before. I wanted to jump and make sure I didn't forget because it feels important. Because a lot of times we're talking about negotiation, we assume that we're talking about negotiating between 2 rational parties, and
Not always the case.
yeah, I feel like I mentioned that I was a single mom, may have felt throwaway, not throwaway, because let's just say I deal with a party that I would not consider to be very rational. And so I have had to develop strategies for dealing with a yeller. And I would encourage everyone to pay attention to how people you negotiate with and work with in your personal and professional lives all the time, what they exact from you, like how they demand your time, and like how many emails and texts they pelt you with in an hour. You do not have to reply to everything. You do not owe anybody your time. And I found a very good strategy is to create a filter if you're dealing with someone who does that in a negotiation, so that you are not triggered to respond in real time, so that you can get to it like when you have a moment. And also a really good reply to someone who is being irrational is just noted. Just one word, noted. It is basically the new phone who dis of professional correspondence. Noted.
Noted? Okay, noted.
Also, now I have to clarify. I do not yell. It's more of like a sense of aggression sometimes. I deal with men 99.9% of the time in these negotiations. And if you have 5 or 6 people, you have attorneys, you have brokers, all on one conference call, as you can imagine, you very rarely can get a word in edgewise. So now that I know the one word to use, I'll just go, noted. But sometimes you have to figure out, sometimes it's like a babysitting situation of like what you want to accomplish. But I think in a negotiation, whether you're negotiating for yourself or you're negotiating on the behalf of somebody else, you go into that situation knowing what you want, and that's what everybody knows is what you want, but you know what you need. And I feel like that's a really important nugget that I've always kind of kept at the forefront of my mind, being like, all right, well, I know what we want, let's accomplish that, but knowing what we really need, and that's what we ultimately want to accomplish so that we have some type of success story.
When we do our salary negotiation workshops, the first pillar of our 4 pillars is know your value. Why is it so challenging? How is it so hard sometimes to be able to know and articulate your value in a negotiation situation? And what's your advice to people to be able to brace for negotiation in terms of knowing their own value?
I always like to say, your secret sauce is your secret sauce. Nobody can duplicate the sauce that you bring to the table. But so often we're afraid to talk about our sauce. And so one of the tactics that I did, I worked in corporate America for 10 plus years. I did not understand the difference between entrepreneurship and corporate America It's a vast difference in how you talk about yourself to other people. So I would put Post-it notes on my mirror, and I would say, I'm a boss, I'm smart, I'm strategic. I would affirm myself with the things that I wanted the world to perceive me as. Then I started telling those stories, such as, right? I think that the way you talk about yourself to others is how you're more comfortable when you have to go and lead in talking about your value and what you're worth. And I always say, you're worth 20% more than what you say. And so if you're asking for a specific salary, you need to add 20% on top of that, because that's the negotiating leverage that you're going to have in between.
Yeah, I think for everybody, it's hard to determine your value, your work value, and also to come up with a number, because there isn't like a specific equation. We can't plug in 1 + 1 = 2. It's just not that quite that simple, and that's actually a really good thing, right? We have to take into account things like experience, your accomplishments, how long have you been at the company. I mean, there's a lot to consider, and so I think the first thing is don't actually think about the number. Take a step back and have some self-reflection and think about, what have I brought to the table? What do I contribute? What have my wins been? And really have that time to self-reflect, and then go out and talk to real people who are in similar industries and roles and ask them, how much money do you make? I'm obviously an advocate for salary transparency, and I hope that one day this won't be such a weird thing to be asking other people how much they make. But I think part of why it's a hard thing for us to do is, one, there isn't a simple answer, and two, we've been taught to talk about money as a bad thing, or like it's tacky, and so let's start ending that today.
I just want to add, if you're asking people, don't forget to ask men, and don't forget to ask men who are junior to you, or like maybe even people you trained or your former interns. Ask them what they think their asking price is, and take all that data into account, because sometimes it's very refreshing to have a perspective from outside ourselves.
So I have a little bit of a different approach, or perhaps maybe to add on to what's being discussed. I think, again, if you go back to the 4 principles, the knowing your worth is what is your alternative, right? You've got to know what your alternative is. And remember, you can create a better alternative for yourself by being good at what you do. This is part of understanding your self-worth. But giving people negotiation advice and absolutes is really dangerous, because it's like giving people relationship advice. I mean, they're not all the same. All marriages, all relationships are different. They all have their dynamics. They all have, the way you negotiate in a big company with hundreds of thousands of employees may not be the same. So between a startup, and so there's so many different dynamics. And just because somebody with your title makes something somewhere else doesn't mean that there's just so many dynamics. So I focus more on the 4 key pillars. Know your options, and you can change those options. You can know what your alternative is, and you can do that by asking questions. You can do that by knowing the marketplace. You can do that by testing out the market. But what you have in your hand is so critical, and it's so important for you to know that. And some people will go out and say, well, I don't want to go out and see what my options are. Well, then you're negotiating without having an understanding of what you're worth. So I think the principles are really important to always go back to those 4 principles. And I'll give you a perfect example. When it comes to negotiating salary, I'll give you an example of someone that it just happened recently, so it's fresh in my mind. You always want to offer something as well, right? I'll give you an example. It was actually my assistant. She wanted to make more money, but consistently for the last 5 years, she's been getting really great raises because she's really good at what she does, but she's planning a family. She wanted more money, and she had this number in her mind, $10,000. She wanted a $10,000 increase in pay. And remember the 3rd pillar we talked about? Ask questions, take your time. So she started, because she knew a lot about what's happening in the business, when she negotiated, she asked questions, and she figured out, and she brought something to the table that was additive. Because remember, a negotiation is a discussion. It's not a demand and then an answer. If you're in a position where you're in demand and answer, good luck. It's a discussion. And you get more insight by asking questions. And she offered something. She said, I notice we do a lot of events internally, and we do it all volunteer basis. Like we have this turkey thing that we do at Thanksgiving, and then we have our Christmas party, and then we have our white elephant, and then we have our Halloween costume. And all those things are going on in and around the company, and everybody volunteers. But what if I took the lead on that in addition to my role? How much would it cost you to hire someone to do that? I can do it. And, she got what she wanted. But she gave something in return. She asked a lot of questions. And so when you're looking to make more money, some of the best question to ask your employer, again, because not all employers are created equal, one of the best questions to ask is, how can I have the opportunity to earn more money? Because if you ask it that way, how can I earn more money? Tell me what the path is to earn more money. Again, it goes back to the pillar number 3, right? Asking questions and understanding. But I think you're going to get a farther outcome. And by the way, she did get her raise, and she does now, she's responsible for more things, and she got what she wanted. So it's a good story.
Anyone else on this?
Well, okay, so I'm coming from a very, very different perspective. And I'm sitting over here kind of digesting what everyone's saying, and I was contemplating how I wanted to answer or go about this, because I have never in my career negotiated a salary, ever in my career. I work in a business that's 100% commission, and so your title and who you are and how you work up is based on what you bring in, right? So kind of backtracking to some of the other points that these panelists have made is knowing what your worth is and what your value is. And I think being a woman in a very male-dominated field, I've had to prove what my value is, what my worth is, over and over and over again. And I've gone from different companies. I've been at the largest commercial real estate companies in the world, and you're always one woman in that room. And so you're sitting there, and I started in Houston, Texas, which talk about the good old boys club. Everyone always thought I was there to get coffee, and I was always someone's assistant. And that you internalize that kind of stuff, and that's what you think your value is. That's what you think your worth is. And there's the fallout of women in commercial real estate is so insanely high. There's 2% women in this industry. And so I think going into it, I came over to Savills within the last year and a half, and it took me a year to negotiate what my worth is. You kind of get traded in real estate, right? You get bought out of companies based on who your clientele is, who you are. And with the change, the societal change, the climate change, and what's going on, and why we have all these amazing women up here talking about what we do, and supportive men out here as well, is that was a new value. That was my new value add. And I negotiated an entire diversity fund that I had every year that I could allocate towards amazing things like that. Savills' name up on this board. Because I thought it was so important to negotiate other items, right? I can't negotiate on my salary. It's not how it works. You eat what you kill kind of thing. But these are just kind of little sound bites that you could take into all of these other amazing strategies. Because I can't really speak to that.
So it's not just the number, it's the whole package.
It's a package deal.
Anyone here work in nonprofits? Curious about that. Okay. Woo. All right, nonprofits. So I was telling a woman, the president and CEO of a nonprofit, about our salary negotiation workshops, and she said, that's really important. I've hired a lot of people, and I consistently see that women don't negotiate, and men do. And this is for a nonprofit in the female empowerment space. Many women on the list, Rachel, have mission-driven jobs. Can you still be out for the greater good while looking out for yourself?
Absolutely. I think it's a very noble vocation, but it's still a vocation. You still have to pay your rent. When we started the list, it's now almost a decade old. It started organically as sort of a listserv, and then quickly realized that it was fulfilling a valuable service. And so when I started thinking about how to turn it into a business, myself and my co-founder, Glynis McNichol, who will be on the storytelling panel later today, she and I talked about whether it should be a nonprofit or for-profit. We both felt strongly that it should be for-profit. We got a lot of pushback from people saying that, well, this is something that people need, and, you're helping. And I was like, yes, we are. Thank you for recognizing that value. And we just really felt strongly that the fact that we were coordinating a group for women to help them level up, we had to acknowledge not only their value, but our own. And it's been, we have these conversations all the time on the list. There's a woman named Cindy Gallup, who everyone should follow on Twitter, because she's amazing. And she tells everyone all the time, like, ask for the highest possible number you can think of without bursting out laughing. And if she hammers it home, and people have started to do it, and then they report back that they got great results. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, obviously. I think one of the sort of things that gets lost sometimes in the, like, make sure you ask for, the highest rate and don't take less than you took the last time and all of that, is sometimes you just want the gig. And sometimes there's that, you mentioned the know your alternative. This is like old school negotiation from when I was in law school, and they made us take it. And by the way, it's pass-fail. Otherwise, I'm not sure how I would have done. But BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And my problem was that I was always like, I don't want to lose that thing. And sometimes you just don't want to lose the gig. So it's important also to really think about that, because I remember making a mistake. Someone I worked for in a company, someone from another department had come to me and was like, we're thinking of doing something like this again. And I was like, great, I'm gonna need X. And she was like, oh, that's much more expensive than we were thinking. Let me get back to you. And she never got back to me. And I was like, I would have done that for like 1/10 of X, because it would have involved maybe like 5 hours, and it would have been nice to take. So there's a lot of things to think about, but there is something called the gender discount, which is basically that women are sort of like expected to be nice and helpy, and if they are not nice and helpy, it is seen as a detriment, where men are not necessarily expected to be nice and helpy, and if they're not nice and helpy, it's just seen as like, well, they're very busy. So it's just important to like check your own impulses, because you want to be helpful. You really do, but also you want to pay your rent.
Let's stay with that for a minute, Rachel. We call it the double bind, right? Women have a choice between being seen as likable and being seen as competent. And we've seen this in politics, of course. How do we manage that? Anyone want to jump in with some advice there?
Yikes. Okay. Again, working with all men, I think women, regardless of how you carry yourself and what you do, you always want to exude confidence, right? And some people are a little bit, you have a shyer demeanor, or you have a really outgoing demeanor, and we're all different. But I think navigating what that looks like, it's situational. I think the most important thing you can do in any negotiation, male or female, is know your audience. And unfortunately, there are a lot of men that when I go into a room, doesn't matter who's in the room, sometimes you're not negotiating for a point, for a purpose, you're negotiating with egos. And I just think that was one of the biggest takeaways I've had from meetings, where I would sit there and I was like, I don't think I should say anything, because there is nothing that can change this dynamic right now. And so kind of knowing how to read a room, I think, is probably one of the most important negotiation tactics, and understanding kind of this overall theme.
I would even add to that, not just knowing the room, but getting to know the people that you're working with. I was always the only woman, and oh, by the way, I was the only Black woman that was sitting at the table. So you already have a double-edged sword against you when no one else looks like you. And I think that naturally the stereotype is that she's the angry Black woman that could come off because I had a voice. But no, that wasn't the case. I was just confident, and I knew my shit. And so people oftentimes are threatened when you know your shit. But when you know it and then you get to know other people, they're less threatened by you when you go and you build a relationship with them. So if you're sitting in a space where you're the only one at the table, you're the only woman at the table, it is knowing your audience, but it's also building a relationship and building allies with them. So when you do come to terms to negotiating, it's more respected versus emotional.
So I love panels like this, because the right answer is there is no right or wrong answer on how to negotiate. These are just perfect examples of how we use it in our everyday lives. And the beauty of panels like this is the diversity of thought, right? The diversity of thought and experience. I personally see unconscious bias or being a minority or being the youngest or being the only. See, I see that as a leg up. I utilize that as a leg up. I love what you said about listening and knowing your opponent and knowing what's important to them and knowing what you're trying to accomplish and putting the goal first and your ego second. When I'm in a negotiation, I figure out what is the outcome that I want to achieve, and that's the priority. Not whether I get the credit, never whether it was my idea, not whether I was the one that brokered the deal. I just want to know what the outcome is. And sometimes you got to leave all those other things on the table, right? Because you want the outcome. But I think that listening and understanding, for me, one of my favorite things to be is underestimated. And in your negotiation, you're absolutely right. In those situations, you're better off listening and learning. And when people don't think, because when you're underestimated, people make mistakes. They say things they're not supposed to, they're not as prepared, oh, it's just her, you know. And so you use all those things to your advantage. And so I often, and I'm just that kind of girl where I see the glass half full as opposed to the glass half empty. But there's nothing better in life than being underestimated and being a good listener and then using that bias, using that underestimation to get information for you to ultimately achieve your goal.
Can I just follow up on that? I'm so sorry. I just about credit, because it may not be important in the moment, but depending on where you are in life and if you're like in a corporation or if you're working for someone, it is very important. Even if you're not taking credit at the time or if someone's not giving you credit, you should definitely keep a record of it. Document all your wins, document your contributions, because if you are being underestimated, then that will help you when you go to the person who's underestimating you and saying, oh, this is why you were underestimating, i.e. underpaying me. Here are all the ways in which I'm amazing. Because it's hard to have to do that, but having a record and having a list, and you will be surprised when you actually go back and figure out why you are amazing. Like, wow, I forgot I was fantastic on November 6th.
And I'm going to add one more back thing on the listening. And especially in some of these rooms where if you don't know the audience, because sometimes you are going to go into negotiation not knowing what the personalities are, so on and so forth. When you're listening, hold on, we call them nuance words. Like, maybe that would sound good. We've kind of had a challenge with that. That kind of sounds, you pick up on these little words because you want to listen to everything we're saying. But we all talk too fast. You can't take notes on everything we're saying. But if you pick up on some of these nuance words, it shows that you are listening. Because when you have a follow-up question, not only does it show that like you're paying attention, you care, but you're going to elaborate. You're going to get more information that will benefit both of you.
And I was just going to mention Alicia Menendez, who's going to be here today. She wrote a book called The Likability Trap. It's fantastic. So if anybody has this challenge of, I want to be nice because that's who I am, but I feel like I'm penalized for it. And she and I were talking recently, and a piece of advice she gave was, when you are with your boss and they say, you were just too aggressive on that deal, you should respond by saying, compared to whom? And that makes them have to check their own bias and come up with a real example. And she said that, based on her research, that response is a way to get real, pieces of evidence back from your boss, but also it doesn't come off as like you can't take feedback well, which can be a bit of a double bind too.
So I love Alicia Menendez. She has a warm place in my heart. She's absolutely fabulous. And just to build on some of those key little findings, I find that it's important, not just in corporate America, but in life, to have mentors and sponsors. Because getting an award, getting a promotion, getting a new role, oftentimes is off of somebody else's judgment of you. And it always happens when you're not in the room. It's happening when you're not in the room. And so the question you ask yourself is, who's carrying your water when you're not in the room, right? Who is that person that knows you and knows? I remember when she did that deal and she didn't take credit for it, but man, she's really talented, right? So I often say make deposits in the bank of relationships, right? Because sometimes if you're not taking the credit and you're giving the credit, people remember that. They see that. You think people don't notice, but they do. And you should keep tally of it because it's important for you and your self-confidence to understand, yeah, this is something I achieved this outcome, but it's really important to get mentors and sponsors in your ecosystem. Get those people that believe in you, get those people that speak on your behalf, get those people that have personal experience with you. And remember, the last comment I'll make is you gave an example. I had a friend, her name is Carla Harris, and she works at Morgan Stanley. If you haven't heard of her, you should Google her. She has some incredible advice on negotiating salaries in the corporate world. And she talks about two kinds of performance. The two kinds of currencies in corporate America as it pertains to negotiations and salaries. The first currency is performance currency. And back to our 4 pillars that we talked about today, know your alternative. Your alternative gets better when you're really good at what you do. So performance currency, you want to be on the best side of the negotiation table, just be really damn good at what you do. So there's the performance currency, but then there's the relationship currency. And that's the building relationship with others, right? That's when building a reputation for yourself. That's when getting to know people, getting mentors, getting sponsors, when people are negotiating on your behalf, or they're just speaking highly of you when you're not there. So those currencies are critically important. But in her story, she was trying to get a promotion, and they said to her, we don't think you're tough enough to lead a team. This is Morgan Stanley. We're in investment banking, and you got to be really tough. We just don't think you're tough enough. And so she taught me a really important lesson. She said, I wasn't being perceived as being tough enough. So she started using that vernacular in her everyday business. She was a senior person. When junior associates would come to her, they'd say, well, I really need your help. I need your opinion, Carla. And she'd say, are you sure? Because I'm pretty tough, Just want to make sure, I'm tough. Oh, yeah. And so she started using that in her words. And so she starts putting it in people's perspective. And, she just started thinking about it and building the reputation for herself. And she tells the story of she's walking in a room and she hears some associates say, oh, Carla Harris is going to be in the room today. She's really tough. And so sometimes think about 3 words that you want to be known as. 3 words that you want people to say about you when they describe you. She's what? She's tough. She's generous. She's a leader. Whatever it is, try to use that in your everyday life, whether you're using it, somebody else is using it, but that becomes part of how people perceive you if you're focused on those 3 words and then live like that. So then eventually those words will become part of how people describe you. Sorry, that was a long example.
But you actually did remind me of something that, and I normally don't say this, but the way that you articulated it made me think of this, is negotiation is a team sport. Like when we're in our emails and we're talking, we all want the credit. Naturally, we talk about it. It builds your ego, it builds your confidence. But something I've personally been working into my emails and how I communicate is I was able to accomplish this. We say I and everything, like I was able to do this for you, this is what I'm so good at. We were able to do this. We were able to accomplish this. And I will go through and I will look at my emails and I'll go delete all the I's or the me's and throw in the we's and the us's. Whether it's on behalf of your company, you have a partner, you have a team. Even if I'm the only one that was involved, doesn't matter. It shows that you're a team player and that you are inclusive.
I want to wrap up, with one with a lightning round question. There's been some really great perspectives here. And I'd like you each, if you could, to name one book, podcast, website, or individual our audience members should check out when they get home for further insight on negotiation.
Ooh, that's an easy one for me. The book Leapfrog, written by Natalie Molina Nino, is a game changer, not just if you're an entrepreneur, but I love it. Talks about leapfrogging, small little, she interviewed 50 entrepreneurs across the country and said, what's your hack, right? Turned it into hacks. Love the book. The Alicia Menendez podcast is a game changer for me personally because I'm really proud to be part of it. And website, I'd be remiss if I didn't say ninavaca.com. I've had 2 decades of an incredible journey, not just in business, but in the corporate boardroom. And what I do is I put my recipe in there. So it's not enough to tell you the story. I want to guide you to the organizations that put me on the map, the people, and really try to show you what can be achieved in this country.
Okay, so negotiation book is called Never Split the Difference by Christopher Voss. He was a former FBI hostage negotiator, and now that sounds so intense, but he now teaches people how to negotiate for salary, for everything. I heard him at TED Women last year. He's fantastic. A big piece of his advice is you just constantly ask people why. So really good. He was also on my podcast the other day, The Females, so you can listen to that. Career Contessa, we have a salary tool called the Salary Project. It's completely free. It's anonymous. It's the only salary database out there also that will give you access to literally thousands of salaries. And then an app that I heard of last night is called Blind, and people are also starting to share like the salary job offers and the packages that they're getting through this anonymous app. It's very tech focused, but it's still really fascinating, and it's also anonymous.
I would say for the negotiation book, I think it's about mindset, and I think mindset plays a huge part in it if you think you are worth what you're asking for. So there's this book called Fearless by Jean Case that I would highly recommend. We have a blog, have a newsletter that goes out every week on bosswomen.org that shares tips, tools, resources for women who's in 2 career paths. Either they're working in corporate America trying to figure out how to move from manager to director, or they are sitting in a very entry-level entrepreneurial. And we share a story. I met the CEO of Sugarfina last year at a conference called Girl Boss Rally. I went up to her and asked her, do you know the power of Black Girl Magic? Do you even know what Black Girl Magic is? That question led us to a 5-city tour called Black Girl Magic with a partnership with Sugarfina, where we created a candy combination together. But it was because I led with data. I told her and shared with her that Black women will be the highest spending consumer by 2021 with a spend of $1.5 trillion. But brands are not looking at them and they're not paying attention to them. And so because of that, that's how I know that data leads the conversation and negotiating what you want. That story is on bosswomen.org, and we have a podcast on iTunes called Boss So Hard, where we interview women, and one of the tools and tips that we ask is around how you negotiate what you're worth.
Wow, that's awesome. I already recommended Cindy Gallup. I'd be remiss if I did not recommend Women NYC. I've actually been working with them, negotiated with Faye. Look, we're both up here on the panel. What an amazing negotiation. But it's just got such amazing resources. Like, I really just cannot recommend it enough. But I know there's a ton of people who run their own businesses or freelancers, their own boss in the audience. I would really like to shout out the Freelance Isn't Free Act. You should take a look at that, because when someone doesn't pay you on time, and there's a provision that people should pay within 30 days, when someone doesn't pay you and then goes back and is like, if you would like your money, perhaps you will do more for me, or like tries to nickel and dime you or squeeze you. That happened to me with a client earlier this year. I had a very unpleasant unwinding with someone, and it took me literal like half a year of chasing down money that was owed me, and every single email I was like, I will direct you to provision like 1C of the Freelance Isn't Free Act. Like, I just kept on hammering. I did end up getting my money, but Freelance Isn't Free Act, like, memorize it, understand it, and share with all your freelancer friends, because there is actually an act in place to help you get paid and treated fairly. That is important.
Okay, so podcast book. Podcast. Are you guys familiar with The Muse? Yeah, Catherine, I think, might be in the room, if you guys want to go hound her later. They just launched, I believe yesterday, a new podcast. And so there are 2 new episodes. I think there's going to be a whole series. I would highly recommend watching those.
It's called The New Rules of Work.
That is correct.
I'm a Muse advisor, so little plug.
And then for a book, we don't have kids in the room, right? Right? Or can I curse? Okay. And actually, I think it is negotiation book, and it's very comical and it's very helpful for personalities of all different types, is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I think it's a very interesting book, and you wear many different hats after you kind of take little nuggets from that.
You know, as we close this panel, I just want to just take a moment and just give a shout out to Amy Nelson and her entire team for where we're sitting and what we're doing. I mean, come on, guys, we got to give it up. I feel like the electricity in this room and this entire place since the moment I walked in has been absolutely amazing. Everything is ran by women, for women, and some men. And I feel like I've made 5 new friends. And just when I think, you know, I have some years of experience, I always learn something new. And I'm excited that I have 5 new friends and I can learn from all their experiences. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That was a great wrap-up. And thank you all for coming. Good luck.